Hello and welcome to the Collapse Experiment. So today I'm talking about a book, one of my favorites from this writer, and it is Will by Will Self. They kind of did a play on his name because it's somewhat of an autobiography. He does admit that it's a fictionalized account of real events. Basically, if he was to tell it in chronological order of the things that happened in his life while he was a raging drug addict, then it just would not be a good story. However, if he moves a few things around and changes some details, it does end up being a very entertaining and sometimes funny, sometimes cringe-worthy book. But this is a book by Will Self, who's on the cover here. I own most of his library, although I've only read 4 or 5 of his books in particular. I am currently reading Walking to Hollywood, which is something that he wrote, I believe it was 2010 it was written. So this is a newer book. Trying to find the date on this. This is an uncorrected proof that I found on eBay, and 2019 is when this was published. So this is him moving away from his fiction, his Kafka-esque fiction that he's done previously. It's also moving away from the Umbrella trilogy, if you will, that he had written, which was a series of fairly thick novels, which started out with Umbrella and then Shark and then finished off with Phone, which I've read Phone. I haven't read the previous 2. I really need to stop reading stuff backwards. But this is where he admits, and he's always admitted to being a drug addict. He enjoyed heroin among other drugs at the time. He mentioned in an interview about how he might have dropped acid like 100 times or more during his early years. Specifically, he was talking about J.G. Ballard and how the man admitted to doing acid once. And from that one acid trip, he was able to write like 9 or 10 books where the acid trip gave him the creative ability to write these novels in a way that was new and unique and made him stand out. And so Will Self was talking about how, like, if one acid trip did that for Ballard, like, he would expect his work to be a lot more creative with the 100+ acid trips that he had. It's not the amount that you need. It's how you take the trip, I guess. I don't know. But this has a lot to do with his early life as a young man, the things that he experienced, the people he was hanging out with at the time. And the one big takeaway I had from this was it talked about his multiple times of going to rehab and how he would meet with these counselors and these psychiatrists and these people that were supposed to try to help him get off the drugs. And at one point, one of the therapists is just like, I don't know why you're here. You clearly don't want to be off the drugs. You have to choose to be off of them if you want to be off of them. You clearly, you already know this, so you can basically stop at any time that you want, which is really like what I noticed early on in life was, and this is not regarding Will Self. This is regarding people that I knew growing up in high school and college. There were the people who were smoking weed and doing coke, and heroin wasn't really a thing in Kalamazoo at the time. That was like 10 years or so later. Some some girl in a neighboring high school had OD'd, and the city of Portage went on a massive crusade to make sure that whoever sold her this stuff was going to die in prison. Which, why it takes the death of a young white girl in high school to make that an agenda, I don't know. But that was what happened. But what I noticed was, for one, it had a lot to do with the people they're hanging out with. Two, it had to do with whether or not they wanted to be doing the things that they were doing. And so, like, even recently for me, like, I stopped drinking at the beginning of this year. I haven't had a drink since, and it really just came down to, like, I don't really feel like doing this anymore. And I'm seeing this also with Joe Rogan recently on his podcast, talked about how he stopped drinking, and he's like, a few months later, he's just like, wow, I don't feel like garbage in the morning. I'm sleeping better. Like, why the hell hadn't I done this decades before? And with Will Self, I think that's the conclusion that he comes to later on. And the thing was, it wasn't the fact that the counselor told him something that he didn't already know, right? No, it was that he was telling Will something that Will already knew, but Will needed to hear it from somebody else in order for him to acknowledge, like, yeah, okay, it is me. Like, no one else is going to help me stop doing this. I've known this for years, but I've wanted to do this because, who knows? He was self-destructive. It was the thing to do. Was it the people he was hanging out with? I don't know. But that was the time of his life. And then later on, he realized that he needed to become serious in life. And the thing is, I don't know if we're ever going to have a writer in the US like Will Self. And I say that because when he got off of the drugs and he decided that he was going to become a writer and that was going to be his profession, he had a social safety net, right? Like, his family wasn't all that wealthy, but they weren't in a position where they couldn't help support him in life. He had the use of the public healthcare system that they have in the UK. So it's not like he had to go out and find like a manual labor job for 8-10 hours a day that was going to eat up his time where he could be writing, and just in order to have health insurance. This is the big difference between places like the UK and the US, where it's like there's a certain environment over there where if you are an artist, you can live and you don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to eat or die of like some ailment because you can't go see a doctor, right? Whereas in the US, it's like you can decide to be an artist, but at the same time, it's like you got to have a side job. You're going to have overly expensive rent. You're going to have the increased cost of groceries over time because of horrible, horrible policies of government, horrible economic incentives. It's not, the US is not a place where an artist can thrive these days. It's not a situation where things are easy. Like, you can live in poverty and survive over in places like the UK, especially if you are not a straight white dude. They will hand you money if you come offshore and decide to live in the UK, as opposed to somebody like Will Self, who, yeah, he enjoyed similar benefits early on with the help of other people. That is not the case today. Japan is learning the same thing, and I'm going off on these tangents, but the whole point of this book is it talks about the funny aspects of being a junkie. It talks about the horrible downsides, the sad aspects of being a junkie, the things that he would go through just in order to get like some dope for the evening. Um, it's almost like it's a truer account of like train spotting, less. Do I want to say that train spotting was glorifying being a heroin addict? Or did it really just encapsulate the aspects of that lifestyle? Um, I felt like this was Will Self's train spotting, but it wasn't a group of characters in that culture. It was solely Will Self and his experience, what he went through, how eventually he came out of that lifestyle. So it's a very good, well written book. He does have his own style of writing. He keep in mind this is a UK novel, memoir. So you're going to find UK spelling, UK grammar, a lot of like, when he's smoking a fag, he's not engaging in coitus with some dude in order to get heroin. He's just smoking a cigarette. So there's going to be differences in language, different terms that are used for certain things, which if you're familiar with British writing, that's what you're going to find. And it does jump around. That's the other thing about this book, is that it starts at one point in time, then it'll backtrack, and then it'll go up to here, and then it'll come back here. So it does jump around, but you're able to follow the story and kind of see the different places that he was in his life for different periods of time, which I think is fairly enjoyable. So that is one thing I liked about Will, and he's done similar style memoirs in the past, but this one solely focuses on his time before becoming a writer and just being a junkie. The description on the back reads as, Will spins the reader from Self's childhood in northern London suburbs to his mind-expanding education at Oxford, to a Barrosian trip to Morocco, which was an entertaining story in itself, an outback vision in Australia, and finally a surreal turn in rehab. So yeah. Self uses drugs from a young age, hiding acid, amphetamine, and weed in a tin in Dilly Duckling's cough. I'm not familiar with what the hell that word is. Cough pastilles. His university years are fueled with books, but also with heroin, hashish, cocaine, grass, and amphetamine. Self smokes dope in suburbia, buys opium in India, and even injects the meth on a camping trip in Wales. Wales Black Mountains. His extreme highs inevitably give way to deep lows in a enthralling cycle that persists and repeats. One of the best minds of our generation, whose mordant humor and vivid images shine in this technicolor portrait of family, art, and self-expression. Self has written and will both a Kunstlerroman and confessional, a tale of excess and degradation, God, and karmic style that leads back to the author's own lack of will. So yeah, that summarizes the book overall. And it does jump around, like I said. Oh, nice little thank you note that I use as a bookmark from the person who sold this to me. And anyways, unfortunately, I feel like this book didn't get as much coverage because it was released January 14th of 2020. I don't know of any big things that happened in 2020 that might have overshadowed a book from a great writer. at that time. You think more people would be staying inside reading more often, but if you can't go out to a bookstore to pick up a book, which of course I just went on eBay and had this shipped to my house. So I don't know. The whole thing of like browsing through a bookstore and seeing a display and just picking something off the shelf just wasn't a thing in 2020, and I wonder why. So anyways, that is Will by Will Self. It's a memoir. It is a fictionalized account based on true events. So there is that aspect of it you should keep in mind if you read it. But it is entertaining. It is funny at times. It's sad at times. But it does tell the story of how he eventually got off of all the god-awful drugs that he was taking at that time, and really how it impacted his life overall. So, have you read any Will Self? Did you read this book in particular? Let me know in the comment section. Until next time, keep on